Fab. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the final session of Defining Your Second Career. My name's Joanna, Sadie. I head up the business team here at Work Avenue, and I'm delighted to be co-hosted with my colleague Yael Solomons, who is waving now, saying hello. She is our esteemed job placement manager, which if for those of you who were on before, we have more jobs now than before the pandemic. So she is doing a sterling job for the employment team. As I said, I head up the business team, and myself and my colleague Kim are here to help you if you would like any business advice, free of charge business advice. And also we run the business skills workshops and put on business events. So just so you know, in fact, this month, tomorrow, we have an event called Making an Impact with Presentation Skills. So for those of you who want to improve your presentation skills when maybe meeting with clients or for interviews, then that I think could be a really fantastic seminar. And in fact, Yael and I are going to be partners on that event tomorrow. That's from 2 till 3:30. So please do feel free to sign up for that. I think it will be a great webinar. And then, unbelievably, since March 2020, we have our first face-to-face workshop, in-person workshop, which is next Wednesday on the 17th of November. And very appropriately, the first face-to-face workshop we will be running is on networking skills. If I'd like to say so myself, it is an absolutely fantastic workshop for those of you who want to grow your business and feel that you could do that through networking. So I would highly recommend it. It's a really good workshop, and you will meet people face to face again. So please do keep an eye out for that. For those of you who are considering setting up a business, we have a great workshop on the 25th of November, which is all about getting started. So that is also a great one just to consider. But without further ado, so just have a look at our events page, and you'll see what's on offer. Anyway, without further ado, I'm delighted to be facilitating this session with both Marc Burman and Caroline Maurice. Just as a very short introduction, I'm not going to do too long introduction because actually the story will tell itself. Caroline Maurice, who is now the director of Penmount Consulting, enjoyed a very successful first career in banking. In fact, she has worked for kind of two of probably the most high-profile investment banks, UBS and then Goldman Sachs. And at Goldman Sachs, she was an executive director, senior compliance officer. She worked in banking for kind of over 20 years and then decided to take a new route and set up her own consultancy. So I'm sure we will hear that story as we're going through the questions. And Marc Burman is currently the founder of Wealthwise, or co-founder of Wealthwise Financial Solutions. He was, interestingly, a criminal solicitor for many years. We probably won't go into too much of who he was defending, but he was a criminal solicitor, and now he helps people with their financial future. So he is a financial advisor, a financial planner. He helps with wills. So the vital things for everybody to kind of be aware of. And I'll let him tell you a little bit more about that. The way this is going to happen is if you've got any questions, please do write them into the chat. Yael will be kind of keeping hold of the chat. And I think what would be best is if you've got a question about something specific that Caroline or Mark are talking about, then let's ask it there and then, rather than saving it till the end. So then it kind of becomes relevant part of the conversation. But also we will have a little bit of time at the end for questions. So I'm going to pin both Caroline and Mark, so you can see us all. There we are. And yeah, please do put questions in the chat. So Caroline, ladies first, if we're allowed to say that these days. Let's go to you first. Do you want to start by just kind of talking us through the early part of your career, how you got into banking at these illustrious investment banks that you worked for?
I think I had a lot of lucky breaks when I started off, because I don't have a degree, so I think that's a very different starting point to today. I actually went to secretarial college, and my first job, I was very fortunate that I was actually offered a job at Kleinwort Benson in domestic banking. So I was lucky that I wasn't, I had a particular role in banking, which wasn't secretarial as day one. I then worked there for a little while, moved into a sales role, and worked in bond sales, then at BZW. But I was very, very impulsive as a teenager and in my early 20s. And one morning when I was in the office at 7:30 or 7:31 and someone said, "Good afternoon," I thought, oh, for goodness sake. I just resigned. I thought, I just don't want to be doing this anymore. My timing was fairly rubbish because I didn't kind of realize what a recession was, and we were right in the middle of one. So it wasn't a very good time to leave. I did secretarial work for a while, then I took some careers advice, and I was told I should become an accountant. And I said, I can't, I don't have a degree. And they said, well, as far as they were concerned, you should be working at that level. And I found my job at what is now UBS, and joined their accountancy training program. So I went to night school for 4.5 years, qualified as an accountant, found myself in the compliance department, which I didn't know anything about because I had my own agenda. And once I qualified, I stayed in compliance and had been there ever since. So it was certainly not a burning ambition at the age of 5. I want to be a compliance officer. But that's how it happened. But it is an unusual career story, and I think would be difficult to mirror today.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah, you're right. I would say that most of the banks these days want degrees from the top red brick universities, I'm guessing. Although I think quite a lot of people are trying to go through apprenticeship schemes and everything. But thank you for that, Caroline. So Mark, burning ambition to be a lawyer, financial planner. Where did you start?
Well, as you've mentioned, I started my professional career as a solicitor. So I was working on a lot of high-profile cases, serious cases, fraud, and a lot of serious stuff. And I was enjoying the work. I was working in London. But what I found is as time went on, I started to do more and more publicly funded work, which is legal aid work. And there were a lot of markers and suggestions that the funding over time would be reduced. And this was the challenge for me, because at the time these announcements were made, I had quite a young family, and my concern was, how can I, fund the lifestyle and make sure my family are okay financially, with a lot of these big question marks on the horizon. So it's interesting, because I found that when you're a solicitor, people tend to come to you for advice, even if that's not your particular area. And I find myself giving advice to friends and family in relation, first of all, to rental properties and buy-to-let properties and that type of thing, because that was something I was quite interested in. But conversations often used to then flow into, well, I've also got this money, what should I do with this investment or these funds? And I was often saying, look, I'm not a financial advisor. but this is what I would recommend you should think about doing. But at that point, I think it's probably fair to say, certainly in my view, financial advisors didn't really have a very good reputation. I think that to be an advisor a number of years ago, you didn't need qualifications, and on that basis, I didn't want to give formal financial advice. But interestingly, in 2012, there was a massive shake-up of the financial advice landscape, and the FCA imposed these very strict conditions and requirements and qualifications to become a financial advisor. So much so, in my view, the profession really cleaned up, if you like. In fact, 2/3 of the financial advisors actually left the profession. So for me, this paved the way for me to consider this area more seriously, and the rest is history. So that's effectively how I got to where I am now. There we are.
Thank you. That's really fascinating. Just stay on you, Mark, and then I'll move to you, Caroline. What did you actually like or not like about your life in the law or working as a solicitor?
I mean, I really enjoyed the variety of cases. Each case was intriguing. It really was. Each case that you dealt with had its own facts and everything else. But the future, what was quite uncertain, and it was certainty that I required, bearing in mind, as I mentioned, having a young family, having to support them financially, etc. So they're the two different sides of the coins that I had in my mind before I decided to take the leap, as it were.
Yeah. And Caroline, what about you?
When you've worked in an organisation for a long time, and the reason why you stay for a long time is because I had a lot of variety. So I was constantly learning, constantly pushing myself. And I enjoy a challenge. I had great colleagues. So I think that's probably the main things that I like. But when you're working in a large organisation, then there are a lot of politics and personalities that you have to get on with professionally. Some of whom you like, some of them perhaps not quite so much. And you're very much prone to, I think that your day-to-day life is very much based on your manager. If you have a manager that you work well with, things are good. If your manager changes and you don't have the same rapport, things can become not so good. And there's an expression that you don't leave the company, you tend to leave the manager. And I think that's very true. Yeah. So I think in my case that things were going very well. Then there was a management change at very senior levels in the States that reflected in the UK, a lot of cost cutting, a lot of, increasing emphasis on that, a lot of metrics and reporting. So there had been a cultural shift in the role that I was doing, which I didn't like quite so much. So, yeah.
So what, obviously, if it's too personal, don't discuss it in detail, but kind of what happened, what was the trigger that caused you to say, right, I'm going to make a change? Well, Caroline first, and then.
When you're in a role, you don't necessarily see the wood for the trees. You just come in every day, and particularly when you've worked for an organization for a lot of time. I worked at Goldman Sachs for 20 years. I think you become institutionalized, and there's a lot of fear of change. So you just carry on doing your role when it may not be the right role for you, but there is no alternative, or there was no alternative that I could see. There were a couple of events that did crystallize some thinking, which then made me think in the last few years, I don't really want to have a vertical trajectory. I'm quite happy just to do my job and go home. I've got other priorities. However, if you're working in a large organization, if I'm plateauing, there are others who are coming up behind you, which therefore means that you are actually falling. So your performance is still good, but when there are others who are, champing at the bit, there's a crossover and think actually it's not good, so good for you. So I became unwell, let's just leave it at that. And so I left and this I think is an important thing to note. It was at a timing not of my choosing, and it wasn't my choice to leave at that time or under those circumstances. And that was kind of the reason why I left. I then had to take a little time out to kind of sort myself out. And then I hand over to Mark, and then we carry on the rest of the journey.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, what about you? What was, I mean, you have said it was kind of the financial reason, but was there other reasons as well, or did you fall out of love with the law?
I mean, not so much. I think what I did, I kind of ensure that and we perhaps talk about this later on, the steps that should be taken when changing career, but I made sure that I had some sufficient kind of capital behind me, so that if it didn't go the right way, we'd be okay financially, and also because I had I'd set up a business previously. I still had a trail of income coming from that business, so I was kind of hedging my bets in some respects. But what I found was quite useful is certainly not to burn bridges, because in the best case scenario, I thought, well, the people I'm working with at the moment could become clients. In the worst case scenario, if it really doesn't go well, then I can go back to doing what I'm doing. So it was that the decision was made on that basis, I would say.
Okay, thank you. And let's kind of now start thinking about the business side of things. How did Mark, let's stay with you for the minute. How did the business, how did it evolve? I mean, I guess there's a fair amount of training. So did you have to keep going with the law as well as doing the training to become a financial advisor? Like, how did that all happen? Because it's not easy just to, I'll be a financial advisor.
Yeah, there was a fair amount of training, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight. So you have to obtain a basic qualification. I said basic, it's what we call a level 4 qualification. And that takes between 6 and 9 months. So that was distance learning. All the courses are online. So I started to do that whilst I was still working. And that involved 3 exams. And then once you've got that level 6 qualification, you've passed that, the next stage is, it was almost like going back to becoming a trainee solicitor. So you have to effectively find a training contract, which is a firm that are willing to train you up, so that you obtain what they call your competent advisor status. It's called CAS. And that involves doing a number of jobs and being assessed and making sure that you're suitable, you give appropriate advice, and you can be trusted to give face-to-face advice to clients. But that was a real catch-22, because it's this, I was kind of almost going back in time, because you can't, it was difficult to get the job without experience, and you can't get the experience without a job. So I found a firm through a recruitment consultant that was willing to train me up and provide a number of clients that I could work on. That was based out in Kent, and that was the process. And that brought with it a number of challenges that I can address now, or I can talk about in just a moment.
Yeah, can we just ask, Dov has said, is it level 4 or level 6? Because I think you said you start on level 4, and then where was the difference?
Yeah, so the minimum requirements is a level 4 qualification, and then the highest level is the level 6, which I've now achieved, which we can again address later on. But there's constant exams and keeping on top of CPD, which is continual professional development. Yeah. But yes, to qualify, level 4 is required.
Okay, so just before we kind of carry on with your story, Caroline, how did the idea evolve as to you'd taken some time out, where did it all start to evolve to set up Penmount Consulting?
Well, I think that maybe 7 years ago, I thought about the idea, but I didn't do anything further because there were 2, for me, absolute blockers. One was, I always worked in a large organization. I'd always had people to bounce ideas off. And if I was on my own, who would I talk to? So I thought that lack of support was one fundamental showstopper. And working in compliance, you need a source of know-how. Things change so much that it's to actually keep on top of it and analyze everything yourself is very, very difficult. And I had no source of know-how. So those two reasons were, well, I can't set up on my own because I'm on my own and I have no know-how. And I think that's actually a very interesting thought for me, because I remember that very clearly. And it shows that when you are ready to set up your business, you have to have a very different mindset, that if there's a problem, you need to be able to solve it rather than think, oh, it's a problem and I can't do anything about it. So I have set up Penmount now, and I still had those two problems. Where was I going to get my know-how and where was the support? But I rang a firm of lawyers who I knew, who provided know-how when I was at Goldman Sachs, and they were happy to do the same thing. In the past, I hadn't even thought of making the approach, but I thought, well, what's the worst they can do? Say no. And they didn't. So that's my source of know-how. And I realized I actually know a lot of people in compliance. So you pick up the phone and you ask questions, and people are generally speaking happy to help you. So, but what was actually pivotal to me on that, and I think that's important to think about, is that my attitude had changed enormously. So at the time, 7 years ago, I wasn't ready. And when I actually did it, I was in a better place and ready to do so.
Lovely, thanks, Caroline. And I think we'll draw on that slightly later. Mark, just going back to you, obviously you had to start with this training contract. So you were still essentially, I guess, working for somebody else, or were you self-employed? So where did the journey take you from being in Kent to kind of setting up on your own?
Yes, I mean, that role was a self-employed role. The view that I took is, having been my own boss for many years before, I didn't want to take on an employed position. So that's on an employed basis, self-employed basis, and effectively the firm would provide some clients, but it's your job to find and source your own clients moving forward. So, well, interestingly, I mean, as an aside, I found that there were two types of financial advisors out there. There was what I call the old school IFAs, which was the type that I referred to previously, which the advisors that are there more to sell a product, and you see them just for the product and then you don't see them again. And then there's the other side of things, which is the financial planner side, which are advisors that help you achieve your objectives, not always by using products, but by moving things around and by smart financial planning. So I found myself squarely into the second category, which involved further training and further qualifications. So that kind of led me down towards the area that I cover now, which is advising business owners, professionals, and young families. So just helping them build up their wealth tax efficiently and protect the wealth of the future generations. So that's the area that I then moved into. So
what did you need to do? I mean, obviously finding clients is kind of, or taking the exams and being qualified to give advice, financial planning advice is one, but obviously there's more to setting up a business than just that. So what other steps did you kind of have to take to to really make it a reality?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of the hurdles that I had to clear, and these were real challenges, is when you're a solicitor going back, you do your work for somebody, you present the work and you present your bill, and that's that. There's no element of sales or closing or anything of that nature. So I had to have quite a steep learning curve in relation to kind of soft skills, sales, etc. And also the marketing side of things as well. As a solicitor, I found that it was very easy to be instructed due to my experience. But the challenge was effectively finding clients, but as time goes on and word gets around of the quality of the advice, etc., that started to take care of itself as time went on.
Lovely. And Caroline, over to you. I mean, how did your business, once you come to the realization that you wanted to set up and you realized that you had some kind of know-how to help you on the compliance side, how did your business start to take shape?
There were a number of things. One, it was just an idea, and I was with some friends out for dinner, of course, in the garden during lockdown. And I mooted this idea, and it was to a fellow who was a consultant himself. And he said that normally I would say, no, don't do it. But in your field, which is so growing, then actually I think it's a good idea. And I think that gave me perhaps empowerment. Someone whose opinion I respected thought it was a good idea. I also felt much more confident in myself and much more self-assured than I had done in the past. And I thought, okay, let's give this a go. But the skills that I had from working were very different skills to that which I needed to start a business. And a friend of mine said, what about coming to the Work Avenue? And I said, well, what's that? And I said, well, they might help you. They might have some thoughts that might be useful for you for setting up your business. And because I'd never had to, I'm sorry, I might be jumping forward, Jo,
No,
it's one
fine.
of the questions,
no,
but
it's good.
I thought I can't just set this up on my own. I don't know how to set up a business. I don't know how to identify clients. I've no idea how to pitch. I don't know how to sell. I hate networking. And I perhaps had a somewhat arrogant view that if I went to think party or something, because I worked at Goldman Sachs, people would come to me. I didn't have to do it the other way around. Perhaps not a good way of thinking, but that's perhaps how I was. So I knew that there were things that there were tools that I needed, which I did not have. So I went to the Work Avenue, and I wasn't sure at that time whether I actually wanted to set up on my own or get another job. So I actually had an initial meeting both with the employment side of the business of Work Avenue and also with Jo. And I decided, okay, well, let's perhaps pursue the consultancy route as my own business. So I'll stop there, and because Jo might want to talk to Marc, or else I can carry about the Work Avenue journey, but I don't want to say too much at the wrong time.
Oh, no. Well, it would just be good to just kind of discuss, I guess, what the challenges were for both of you in terms of actually kind of going about setting up a business. So, as you say, sometimes people think, oh, it's the easy route, I'll be my own boss, I don't have to report to anybody. But as you've kind of touched on, Caroline, there are, when you work, especially for a big organization like Goldman Sachs, there's people to do everything for you. So I don't know if you want to start with that, and then I'll go to Marc, what the challenges are.
Yeah, I guess I was ignorant. I didn't really know what the challenges were. It was just an idea. So when I went to the Work Avenue, and there are a lot of courses. There are courses on sales. There's courses on pitching and networking and pricing and negotiation. And all of these skills kind of opened my eyes to, oh, okay, I'm going to have to do this, this, and this. And how much do you need to earn? Well, I've got no idea. So I think Jo said, well, think of a figure, work it back over a year, then work it back over a month. You don't want to work all the time, so call it 9 months, and then you'll realize what you need to earn and how you're going to price. How am I going to price? I've no idea. And then bit of market research. So all of a sudden, these aspects of the business were coming together, and I had lots of spider diagrams all over the place. And then all of a sudden, there was some shape taken. But the really fun piece I had was the branding and the website. And you need a website. I was told, yeah, okay, I'll set up a website. And I went on to, I think, Squarespace, and I spent 3 hours just looking at the heading. I thought, I have got not the slightest idea how to do this. And I remember Jo saying, or she's saying that you've got certain skills in certain areas, but where you don't have that skill, in some ways time is money. I didn't have the skill in any way, shape or form to set up a website. So you know what? I made some inquiries. I now have a website that was set up by someone who was very good. I said what I needed. And guess what? A week later, it was done. Yes, I had to pay for it, but it was an important thing to have, which I could not have done as well as he did without his help. Fun thing was the logo. Me, when I doodle, the only thing I can doodle in is noughts and crosses. I'm so uncreative. But you need color and you need a design. So this was somebody else's forte. So I said, help me out. I mean, the Work Avenue made some suggestions of how would you describe yourself in short, simple words. Then I gave it to somebody else and it was kind of, what can you come up with? And so I realized there are some things I could do myself and other things that would be much more sensible to outsource. And so I did outsource the website, the logo, tidying up presentations. And then all of a sudden I had a website, I had a contact me page and business cards. And so this thing took shape, but no clients. So I'll hand back to Jo and Mark, perhaps to talk about that later.
Yeah, Mark, so tell me kind of how, your story on that side of things, because I guess it's a little bit different for a law firm rather than a firm like Goldman Sachs, or when you're starting out.
Yeah, I mean, it had been about 17 or 18 years since I'd done an exam. So, of course, there were lots of exams to qualify as a solicitor, but that's quite a long time. And, the brain tends to get slightly rusty over time. So it was a challenge getting back into the books, as it were, and studying and getting back into that way of thinking. So that was the first kind of mental challenge. And then really to echo the points made by Caroline, the pitching and the closing, that was completely new to me, and that was quite a challenge, and that was another skill that I didn't anticipate having to learn and study and appreciate. And also, again, outsourcing is a massive point, because, as you can imagine, setting up as a financial advisor, the FCA have so many regulations and requirements, be it money laundering and everything else that you need to be on top of. And it's interesting because the requirements to become a solicitor back then was nowhere near as involved as the application to become a financial advisor, certainly following 2008 and everything that happened more recently. So I had to outsource a lot of that work, and that, again, as we said with Caroline, that freed me up to do what I do best, which is being sat in front of clients.
Lovely. And kind of, well, what are the challenges, do you think? I mean, obviously, Caroline, you said the kind of challenge of not being creative, or not being able to set up a website, but let's stick with you, Mark. First of all, what would you say, put the audience off? What are the main challenges of working for yourself compared to maybe having a kind of a structure around you?
Yes, in a word, I'd say the uncertainty. The employed role, has that certainty of your wages going into your account each month. You know what's going in, so you know what you can afford to spend or set aside, etc. And you're kind of going into the unknown to an extent. You can look around and you can make estimations and try and plan ahead, but it's all very new. So I guess, if anything, it's that leap and that degree of uncertainty, if I'm looking at it from a dark point of view.
Lovely. And Caroline, what's your thought?
I would echo that, but if you said if I was going to be brutally honest with everyone, I'd say don't start until you're in the right frame of mind to start. That you need to feel confident, you need to have self-esteem, you need to have self-assurance. And when I left, I did not have those qualities. I needed to work on them, and it took time to build them up, because when I left the firm, it was not of my timing or choosing. And I think that it takes time to work through issues. And if you can't sell yourself, or if you don't believe in yourself, how can you expect someone else to do so? So you need to be in a position where you are comfortable approaching strangers. You are comfortable discussing your business. You are comfortable saying what you charge without embarrassment. You are comfortable saying to yourself, I'm worth it. And there's a mantra that someone said, if not me, then who? You think, well, sometimes people can look at a job spec or look at a role and say, oh, I can do that and that, but I can't do that. But if you look for the perfect role in which you can do 100% of everything, you're going to be waiting for a very long time. And so if not me, then who? You can pick up a lot of things. If you've worked, a lot of people, I think, come to Work Avenue having had a job. So they have got experience, and there's a lot of information and know-how that you just accrue. Just, it's part of your DNA that you can't actually put on paper what your skill sets are, because some of them you just have. You know, I was asked to put a meeting together, and I realized it was a meeting with about 10 people. I thought it was going to be needed more than once. So I thought, sod it, I'm doing this once and I'm making it recurring. In that case, it's much easier to cancel a recurring meeting than set up for 12 people the following week. Now, I wouldn't put that on my skill set or CV, can organize a meeting, because we can all organize a meeting. But the difference was, because I've worked and knew, I think this could be recurring, I didn't say, well, should I make it recurring? I just did it. So there's a lot of skills that you need to remind yourself that you have because you have been working, and that won't appear in a line in your CV, but you have them, and someone who is new to working frankly won't. So I think that the key thing is the confidence that you can do it, because if you don't feel you can do it, then it's not the right time for you.
Lovely, thank you. Oh, and what about the advantages of working for yourself rather than getting that salary in every month? Mark, over to you.
I mean, I think the autonomy, you know, being your own boss, you know, organizing your own diary, particularly for myself with a young family, I would, and I still do, organize my meetings around events for the children. If it's something at school, it's a play, or you know, something that I would like to be at, I'm always there, which I really appreciate. And also, I guess in some respects, the sky's the limit. If you're willing to put in the hours and work harder, then you know the rewards, it can be very rewarding if you're willing to invest your time and effort into your own business.
Interestingly, though, just picking up on that point, both of you have got businesses where you deliver the work as well as run the business. So have either of you looked into kind of opportunities to scale? Because you know, there's only one of you that only 24 hours in a day, and you don't want to be working 24 hours a day. So is that a possibility, or have you thought about that?
I have.
Go on, Caroline.
Opportunities can come up from all sorts of different directions, and so no opportunity should be passed up. And to kind of explain this further, I updated my LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn makes suggestions of people that you should connect with. And one of them was a fellow that I used to work with. He's in New York. I thought, oh, I haven't spoken to him for a long time. Exchanged emails, and he said, you should meet my friend Jane. I thought, lovely. And 3 weeks later, there was an email from this fellow, Roger, Caroline, meet Jane. And I thought, oh, for goodness sake, she's in New York. I'm in London. What on earth have we got to talk about? But I thought it'd be very rude if I didn't then say, hi, Jane, let's get together. So I put a Zoom conversation together and thinking this is an absolute waste of half an hour. However, she was a compliance officer in the same field as me, but in New York. She was an absolute breath of fresh air. And within 30 minutes, she said, you need a client management system. You simply can't just keep notes of clients on the back of a book. You need to do this. You need to do. She gave me all things I needed to do. And I thought, oh, okay, because she had been in my position 9 years ago, and she was a typical New Yorker. There was no messing. It was like, do this. I thought, all right, okay, network with this organization and that organization. And then about 3 months later, we kept in touch, and then she has a US client who in the UK office, the compliance officer was leaving. So she put me forward to do a short-term cover at this company, which unfortunately didn't happen because they found someone new. But from completely left field, there's an opportunity. And she is now revamping her business, and she wants to put me on her website, and I want to put her on my website, so that maybe there's, you know, Penmount International Consulting.
Love it, love it. A global
smoke
business.
and mirrors, a bit more depth to it. So yes, I have done, and working in compliance and governance and the ESG space. ESG is so broad, the environmental, the social.
Just give people who may not know what ESG means.
Well, ESG is environmental, social and governance issues. So the environmental stuff is very much the climate, sustainability, water usage, waste, climate change, and there's a lot of regulation and governance around that space. And it's an emergent risk, and working in compliance, I felt that why not try and get in at the relatively early days, because there's going to be a plethora of regulation. I mean, there already is, there's going to be more. So try and get in early, but you can't just be the E. There's the social piece, and diversity, inclusion. And I've been talking to someone who used to head up diversity and inclusion at a large bank. I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe I could work with her if I had that opportunity. And on the governance piece, I, like Mark, decided to do some exams and qualified as a corporate governance professional a few years ago. So, you know, I think that if you're setting up on your own, you have to be clear what you're offering. Not go too wide, which sounds like I'm going very wide, but you need to be clear on what your offering is, and do you have all the pieces? And if you don't have all the pieces, where can you get those pieces?
I'd really back that up. Just from my own experience, I've had my own sales training, sales consultancy business for over 20 years, which obviously I now is very much on the back burner. But in the past, I've also had associates who I work with to deliver work that I possibly could have done, but wasn't really within my skill set. So have brought other people in where I've invoiced the client, I've taken a cut of that client, but that was a way that I expanded my business slightly. So they did training or kind of leadership training that I didn't feel that was, you know, right in my skill set, and I made a bit of money from it, and it all came under the Leapfrog banner. So it's a really good point, Caroline. Thank you. And Mark, just any comments on that from your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very, very difficult to grow the business if you're not outsourcing some of the roles and the jobs. So myself, I've not only been growing the business, but also involved in getting as qualified as possible and doing lots and lots of exams. And the exams can, you know, be quite a drain on your time. So I'm certainly proud to say that I'm now in the top 3% of advisors in the UK. On the basis that I've done so many of these exams, but you only have so many hours in the day. So I've got an in-house administrator and also an outsourced paraplanner. So a paraplanner is the person that does the research that I would then use in my reports to make recommendations to clients. So I massively endorse the idea of outsourcing everything that you don't want to do and isn't directly fee-earning work. Otherwise, you know, you're just acting as an expensive administrator. So that's my view on it.
And that's a really, really good point. So what was the mindset piece, Mark, on, you know, going from you doing everything to taking, and it is a massive step and a step that so many people struggle with, to actually recruiting and paying somebody, even if it's, I don't know, are they part-time, full-time, your paraplanner and your administration person? So
the administration is full-time because there's lots for them to be getting on with. There's always something that needs doing on the admin side. The paraplanners would be instructed as and when a report is required. So for each piece of business that I do would require a detailed suitability report. So they would go off for each case I instruct them on and do all the research for me, and I would advise which areas they should be looking at. They would provide the research, and then I'd then put it together. So it's, yeah, again, it's like the chicken and egg scenario. You don't want to take anyone on unless you can, you know, afford to pay them and you have sufficient work for them. But luckily on my side, the admin is so wide. There's always something that they can be getting on with. So that turned out to be quite cost effective as a decision.
But still, I guess, you take a hit, don't you, on your profits the moment you start recruiting somebody.
Yeah, and it comes back to the thing that there's only so many hours in a day, and for me it's important that I can do the things I want to do. I want to be able to go to the kids' school as and when something's on, and I can't be an administrator, an advisor, and a dad. There's just not enough hours in the day, so that paved the way for that decision.
Okay, just to tell everybody, we've got kind of 8 minutes. So if there's any questions, please do write them in the chat. I'm going to just ask one more question, but then I'm very happy to be able to pass over to you if you do have any questions for Marc or Caroline. I'm going to plug Marc's, the fact that Marc, just Marc, tell us how Work Avenues helped you as well as where you are working.
Yep, so my main office is in Elstree. That's where the registered office is, but I live very local to Work Avenue, so I live literally just down the road. So I spend more of my time here than I do in my office in Elstree. In relation to Work Avenue, I've utilised the wage programme. So I engaged one of the team here to help me with some marketing. Again, that's another example of outsourcing. I didn't have the bandwidth or the inclination to carry out a marketing regime, and one of the team did that for me. And also I meet with Joe every couple of months, and we have like a bit of an accountability session as to the growth of the business and what have you. So both of those areas is something that I've enjoyed doing and has really benefited the business.
And just on that, we've had a question from Johnny. Thanks, Johnny, about, can you elaborate more? Johnny, I didn't know if it was to either of them specifically or just for one of them. I don't know if you can write that down or just take yourself off mute, about how you, Marc, please. Can you elaborate more about business development, finding new clients and building a book?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different ways to do it. I started with networking. I started using social media, word of mouth. I would also speak to, having been a solicitor for many years, I had a lot of solicitor contacts, and a lot of these solicitors were, limited company directors. So that was the first port of call, because they know me, they trust me, they like me. So that was one way that I reached out to my first list of clients, if you like. And so much so that now my main focus is on advising company directors, particularly if they have children. That's my kind of sweet spot for advice, because that's where I give most value. But yeah, again, there are so many ways to approach it. BNI, I joined that for a couple of years. That provided me with a number of clients. And then once I found I had a bedrock of clients that I've been doing a really good job for, then the referrals would come from there. But I would say it certainly doesn't happen overnight. What I do is super high trust work. I'm dealing with clients' life savings and their inheritance for the children. So it takes a little time for that trust to be explained. And that's essentially how I did it.
Thank you. And just to kind of finish off for the last few minutes, let's go to you, Caroline. Any tips and advice that you would have for people who are considering starting a business, having had a stellar career in whatever sector they're in?
For me, it's like the next chapter of a book, that I couldn't be doing this without the background that I had. And so it's a book with a new chapter with empty pages, and for me to write the story, which I think is really very exciting. I can have a better work-life balance. I don't have to feel, I can work when I choose to work a lot of the time. If I want to work of an evening or first thing in the morning, I can, as long as you get the stuff done. And there are so many new skills that I'm learning that you're just absolutely not going to be professionally stale in any way, because if it's not learning about regulation, it's the softer skills and the networking skills and being, kind of fine-tuning those skills, which are new to me, but it's exciting. So I think that it's, the future is exciting. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And Mark, last tip or advice from you?
Couple of tips I would say: make sure you can meet your overheads, your expenses. So I would say, if you can, try and build up at least 6 months worth of living expenses if you're taking the plunge. So you've got at least that backup financially. I would just echo the idea of not burning any bridges. Keep the door open, as I said before. Worst case scenario, you can go back to what you were doing, and best, they may become clients. And then finally, I would say, perhaps this is more personal to me, but I went on this mission because I felt I started a little bit later in life. I went on this mission to get as many qualifications as I could, and therefore I achieved the level of experience that I've got at the moment. So there are a few things to be thinking about. Well,
we certainly have two very qualified. I think, Mark, you definitely win the award for taking the most exams of anyone I've ever known. But I really, really appreciate you both taking the time today out of your busy business lives to talk to us. And as I say, please, if any of you have got questions that you want us to ask, kind of because you haven't asked them now, then we'll try and pass them through. If you'd like any free of charge one-to-one business advice, then please do give us a call. I don't know, all the details are on our website, so please do feel free to come back and see us and get support in considering setting up a business. And yes, thank you very, very much to Mark and to Caroline, much appreciated. And in 5 minutes time, we will be moving on to the final session Q&A, any kind of final questions from the Work Avenue team. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again to Mark and Caroline.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.